suffering the loss of her man, and I'm, going to the ocean. Taking my wife to the ocean.
At 81 years old, Sam Elliott carries the same slow burn swagger that made him Hollywood's mustache and mystery icon for half a century. He's a man who built a career on saying very little and letting the silence do the talking. So when someone like him offers hints about his private life, especially by giving us a glimpse behind the curtain of romantic chaos from his early Hollywood years, it feels less like gossip and more like uncovering a lost chapter of Western folklore. He didn't brag, he didn't boast, but he crossed paths with actresses along his rise in ways the cameras never captured. The way he tells it, those encounters weren't scandalous interactions. They were about a time when fame was loud, the nights were long, and Hollywood was a far more reckless frontier. So saddle up as we trace the truth behind the whispers. Sam Elliott has always been one of those rare Hollywood figures who managed to stay both legendary and elusive at the same time. For decades, he built a career on the slow, deliberate confidence of men who don't need to announce themselves. He didn't chase celebrity culture, didn't sell his private life for publicity, and never pretended to be anything other than what he was, a working actor with a voice carved out of gravel and a mustache that carried half the West on its shoulders. The public projected myths onto him because he never bothered to correct them. That was part of the spell. And that is exactly why, when Sam Elliott speaks about anything vaguely personal, people listen with both curiosity and disbelief. This is even more thrilling because for decades, he dodged questions about his early Hollywood relationships with the same discipline he brought to his performances. He'd shrug off rumors with a smile, steer the conversation toward his work, or offer one of those cryptic, half-joking lines that gave nothing away but made reporters feel like they had just been let in on a secret. His life before Katharine Ross, his one confirmed documented love story, was treated as a dusty chapter he had no interest in rewriting. But time has a way of loosening even the tightest grips on privacy. It changes how people hold their stories. So when he casually mentions anything, most people see it as him being reflective of his past rather than trying to brag. So to make this make sense and see it the way he sees it, let's jump back in time to when he first appeared. The Hollywood he met, free love, studio power, and young actors on the rise. When Sam Elliott first stepped into Hollywood, the industry was in the middle of an identity crisis wrapped inside a cultural revolution. The studio system was collapsing, the counterculture was exploding, and every part of American entertainment was caught between the old world and the new. Veteran actors who had built their careers under strict moral contracts were watching a younger wave of performers arrive with long hair, political opinions, and a sense of sexual freedom that would have gotten them blacklisted a decade earlier. This was the world Elliott entered, and it was a place where rules were flexible, careers unpredictable, and personal boundaries often non-existent. It wasn't the Hollywood of glamorous premieres and tidy romances. It was the Hollywood of backlot trailers, smoky after-parties, and late-night conversations about everything from art to anarchy. Young actors weren't just auditioning for roles, they were trying to define an entirely new era. Elliott was not the stereotypical rebellious newcomer. He wasn't outrageous or reckless in the way others were, and he wasn't the type to chase shock value to get noticed. He came with a disciplined nature and a working-class backbone, but he still found himself swept into the same currents affecting everyone else. Even the most grounded performers of the time couldn't escape the cultural shift happening around them. The 60s had turned social expectations upside down, and the 70s were busy rewriting the script on sexuality, relationships, and the meaning of fame. For rising actors, intimacy and collaboration often went hand in hand. It wasn't unusual for castmates to become romantically involved. Chemistry on screen often echoed chemistry off-screen. Directors encouraged actors to be uninhibited, to live the part. And that attitude didn't stop when the cameras turned off. The idea of separating professional life from personal life was almost laughable. Everything blended together, from the roles, emotions, hookups, heartbreaks, to the egos and ambition. Hollywood was also physically smaller then. Everyone went to the same bars, the same classes, the same cramped casting offices where young hopefuls sat shoulder to shoulder, waiting for their shot. There was a sense of closeness, a kind of creative pressure cooker, where friendships, rivalries, and romantic entanglements formed in an instant. An actress you auditioned with on Monday could be your co-star by Friday and your date by Saturday. Nobody thought it unusual. The studios, once obsessed with protecting the pristine public images of their stars, had loosened their grip. If anything, a little scandal, or even the suggestion of it, could boost an actor's fame. Magazine photographers lurked outside trendy cafes, but they weren't chasing actors for behavior. They were chasing them for vibes. In fact, having long hair, leather jackets, and a certain unbothered confidence was more valuable than a perfect reputation. It was also a time of reinvention for women in the industry. Actresses were no longer expected to be polished dolls in fitted gowns. They were activists, artists, and rebels. They demanded more complicated roles and lived more complicated lives. Sexual liberation wasn't just a cultural movement, it was part of the professional environment. A woman could pose for a magazine shoot one morning, join a protest in the afternoon, and show up to a studio party that night, all without anyone batting an eye. Sam, with his deeply masculine charm and unmistakable presence, stood out in a sea of unpredictability. He didn't need to shout to be noticed. He was the kind of actor people gathered around, the quiet one in the room who seemed to understand the world without needing to conquer it. That made him appealing, especially in an era when sincerity was becoming a rare commodity. Yet even someone with his natural reserve was inevitably pulled into the rhythms of the time. Relationships formed quickly, ended quietly, and often slipped through the gaps of public memory. Many actors from that era speak openly about how common it was to drift into romance with castmates or fellow newcomers. So when he looks back and mentions 7 actresses from his early chapters, he isn't describing betrayal, conquest, or confessions meant to shock. He's describing a Hollywood that no longer exists. A time when careers were raw, emotions were unfiltered, and intimacy was woven into the fabric of the industry. A world where young actors learned about love, desire, and disappointment in equal measure, often before they learned how to negotiate a contract. It was the last era where Hollywood lived with its heart fully on display, for better or worse. Speaking of hearts on display, his love story with Katharine Ross is the one chapter he has always been willing to share. So before we talk about his unshared history, let's take a look at what's in the open. Falling for Katharine Ross, the one romance he does claim publicly without hesitation. In a town known for brief marriages and briefer loyalties, they became the exception not because their relationship was easy, but because it was real, lasting, and earned. Their story did not begin with fireworks or dramatic confessions. It began quietly, almost invisibly, on the set of Butch Cassidy and The Sundance Kid. She was already a star, a bright figure who had worked alongside Hollywood giants. He was an uncredited background extra, trying to find any foothold he could in an industry that barely noticed him. In later interviews, he admitted that he watched her from a distance, not with romantic intent, but with admiration for her capability, talent, and presence. He once confessed that he was just a shadow on the wall, and because of that, he would have never presumed. What makes their story remarkable is that years passed, a full decade in fact, before they actually spoke to each other. Their lives drifted in separate directions, their careers developed independently, and he continued carving his slow but steady path upward. She, on the other hand, navigated a complex career filled with breakthroughs and setbacks, as well as personal challenges that rarely made headlines but shaped her resilience. It wasn't until they reunited on the set of The Legacy in 1978 that the pull between them finally became undeniable. By this time, both were older, wiser, and far more attuned to what they wanted. He was no longer the unknown figure lingering in the background. He was a rising actor with a presence Hollywood was finally learning to appreciate. Katharine, having been shaped by the unpredictable storms of fame, recognized in him something rare. His steadiness, sincerity, and emotional maturity set him apart from the actors who treated relationships like props. Their connection wasn't formed through Hollywood spectacle, but through genuine compatibility. He has said that they just understood each other, that their communication was easy, honest, and free of the posturing that often infects relationships in the entertainment world. She once mentioned that his ability to make her feel safe, not just in a protective way, but in the emotional sense, was what drew her in. Within a year, the two were married, and for him, this marked a profound shift in how he viewed relationships. The young man who wandered through the chaotic intimacy of the 1970s Hollywood now understood the value of stability. He has described her as the anchor that steadied the wild sea he had been drifting through. Their marriage wasn't rushed, reactionary, or built on a superficial spark. It grew out of mutual respect, shared goals, and a grounded approach to partnership. What makes his story unusual is that he has never shied away from crediting her directly for the life they built together. Many long-married celebrities speak about their partners with a kind of practiced fondness, but his affection is unmistakably authentic. He once admitted, "The reason I'm here is because of Katharine." That sentence carries weight. It tells you exactly how he sees the role she has played in his life, not as an accessory to his career, but as the foundation of his world. She, too, has spoken about him with warmth and admiration, noting that his loyalty is one of his defining qualities. She has said that while he is famously private, he is also deeply open-hearted with the people he loves. Their daughter, Cleo Rose Elliott, became the final piece of that tightly woven family bond. The strength of their marriage is not that it avoided challenges, it's that it weathered them. They balanced demanding careers with personal life in a way few Hollywood couples manage. They stepped back from fame when they needed to. They prioritized their family. They respected each other's craft without letting work overshadow their connection. His life with Katharine Ross is the chapter that gave his earlier years meaning. Even now, well into their later years, Sam Elliott and Katharine Ross move through life with the sort of calm, unshakable rhythm that only 4 decades of commitment can shape. They have not split and are not even close to doing so. They instead seem to have doubled down on living life on their own terms, far from the noise of Hollywood and the myth-making that has followed him for most of his career. In recent years, they have slipped further into a routine that suits them, the sort with quiet mornings, long drives up the coast, time spent on their Oregon property, and the kind of slow living that feels miles away from their acting roots. When they do step out together, as they did in 2025 for the advanced screening of Landman, fans are reminded that theirs is an old-school marriage, the sort that still looks like partnership rather than performance. Now to the part of his life that many have always suspected, or at least been curious about, all this time. The 7 women who shaped Sam Elliott's Hollywood legend. Sam Elliott has always carried a certain gravity and old-school magnetism that survives long after the credits roll. He never needed a scandal to stay interesting. Yet, throughout his rise from unknown hopeful to Hollywood icon, 7 women crossed his path in ways that shaped the man fans thought they knew. Some connections were brief, others creative, and a few carried that unmistakable charge people whisper about for decades afterwards. While none of these stories comes with tabloid certainty, every one of them left a mark on him, on Hollywood, and on the mythology that built itself around Sam's slow drawl and impossible calm. The first of these women is Sybil Shepherd. She was already the kind of woman whose smile could hijack the room when Sam first worked near her orbit. They shared promotional circuits and mutual friends during their early careers, the kind of Hollywood overlap that creates long nights, shared conversations, and a subtle hum of what if. People who saw them together described an easy chemistry. Their interactions were the type that made people look twice. And maybe the possibility was the whole point. Our next beauty is Farrah Fawcett. Her fame burned white hot, even in casual settings. Sam once described her as sunlight personified, and those who knew them during the mid-70s said they shared a warmth that floated somewhere between admiration and flirtation. They weren't dating, as Farrah's life was already its own whirlwind, but Sam had a way of grounding her, offering the rare peace she rarely found in the frenzy that followed her everywhere. Their connection was momentary, fleeting, and deeply private. But in Hollywood, sometimes the smallest moments echo the loudest. Glenn Close was another bright star in his orbit, the kind of woman who hovered around leading men as she knocked them off balance. When she and Sam crossed paths in the early 80s, they impressed each other with their discipline, intelligence, and stubborn commitment to craft. Glenn respected that he didn't chase fame the way many did, while he admired how she commanded a room without raising her voice. Their relationship was watched by all, and it was understandable why. They were two forces who understood each other completely, and each subtle glance or spoken word proved it. It was more than romance. It was recognition, and sometimes that's more powerful. His fourth muse is Cher. She had charisma that didn't just fill space, it rearranged it. She knew him through friends in the music and film crossover scene back when the lines between genres and personalities blurred after midnight. The chemistry between them was no secret to anyone present. She teased him, pushed him, pulled him out of his cowboy shell, even if just for an evening. They weren't lovers, at least not in any way that left evidence, but anyone watching would have sworn they were dancing along the edge of something neither of them seemed to mind. Then there was Jessica Lange, who carried a softness the world rarely got to see. When she and Sam encountered each other during the height of their careers, they bonded quickly over the private costs of fame, the sacrifice, the scrutiny, the ache of being misunderstood by people who only saw the surface. Their conversations were long, sincere, and strangely intimate for two people who weren't romantically involved. Jessica had an emotional vulnerability he respected, and he had a steadiness she appreciated. Two souls passing in different directions but slowing long enough to acknowledge the weight they shared. Sissy Spacek was the one who understood Sam creatively more than most. They spent time navigating the same artistic circles, guided by the same less is more philosophy that would later define their careers. Friends said they were almost mirror images, both shy, both thoughtful, both uninterested in Hollywood's hang-on glamour. Their connection was genuine, rooted in mutual respect, and the kind of comfort that only comes from recognizing a piece of yourself in someone else. And then there was Raquel, the one woman he admitted, years later, had once stopped him dead in his tracks. Their 3-week connection in the mid-70s wasn't a scandal. It was a moment out of time. She was a global icon already, while he was still trying to get his boots planted in Hollywood. She found his quiet authenticity irresistible. He found in her a surprising vulnerability hidden beneath the world's expectations. They shared late-night conversations, private getaways, and a chemistry he never denied. Even decades later, it wasn't built to last, and it wasn't meant to. But it mattered deeply and quietly in the way the most unexpected encounters sometimes do. While Sam never spoke openly about what really went on behind the gates of Hugh Hefner's famous mansion, his rare appearances there have fueled quiet speculation for decades. The Playboy Mansion was a world built on secrecy, late-night parties, whispered encounters, and a revolving door of starlets who drifted in and out of Hollywood's spotlight. Anyone who stepped onto that property, especially in the wild 70s, inevitably brushed shoulders with women the public never knew about. Sam never confirmed anything, never bragged, never fed the gossip mill. But the mansion had a way of creating stories no one ever wrote down, and some fans still wonder whether a few more names belong on the list. Women who crossed his path in those velvet-shadowed hallways and left their mark in ways only he will ever remember. Do you think there might be more women than he's letting on? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. To enjoy more exciting videos, click play on the video on your screen. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get notified when a new video drops.